I fell in love with a gangster in our neighborhood. After chasing him for 3 years. He finally got annoyed. Jocelyn, I'm a rotten person. What do you like about me? Get lost. But when I was bullied by a group of bad guys, he protected me behind him like a madman. Anyone who dares to touch her, I'll kill them. I fell in love with a warm and kind young man. He was in the dark, yet he couldn't bear to see others without sunlight. So I want to give him my light. I want to give him a home. I accidentally tore the clothes of the gangster leader. The air froze for a few seconds. I met his gaze awkwardly. Sorry. The gangster leader's face was gloomy. His peach blossom eyes were like shooting cold arrows, sweeping towards me crazily. He asked, Jocelyn, did you do it on purpose? No. I swear. I was so scared that I quickly let go. The torn pieces of the gangster leader's clothes fluttered in the wind. The vein on his forehead twitched. Then what do you want? I suddenly felt shy and said to the strong bald Kyung pattern in front of me, I want to confess my love to you. Finn is a well-known gangster in our neighborhood. People said he had killed someone and called him a lunatic. But I like him. I like him so much that I want to be with him regardless of everything. But I'm the good girl in everyone's eyes. Falling in love with Finn is the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. At first, there was no connection between us. I just saw him finding a home for a stray cat, saw him carrying his sick grandmother to the hospital, saw him sitting alone on the rooftop of the community, smoking a cigarette lonely. The wind blew up his t-shirt, as if it was going to push him down. Finn is not a bad person. This is a secret that only I know. I'm not sure when exactly I fell in love with him. But that day, when I was walking home from school, I was stopped by 2 drunk hooligans. In the most helpless and scared moment, Finn appeared like a god. He was wearing a shirt that had been washed until it turned white. And he said very arrogantly, let go and get lost. Looking at his cold and impatient eyebrows and eyes, I heard my heart beating very fast. Believe it or not, I definitely have no intention of defiling you. Pulling back my thoughts, I carefully helped Finn pull up his pants. Finn stood still, holding his pants. I looked up embarrassed. Could you please ip it up yourself? No matter how much I like him, I can't help him do this kind of thing for the first time. A girl still needs to be reserved. Finn laughed. His laugh was extremely sarcastic. Is this your way of confessing your love? Or do you want to deliberately attract my attention? Finn's face is really alluring, especially when he smiles. He's like a wild fox. I swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said in a low voice, can't it be both? Finn was speechless, probably moved by my sincerity. A few seconds later, I was pushed out the door by him. He also said 2 words to me, crazy. Well, those who are loved always feel secure. It doesn't matter. I'll just confess my love again next time. Another weekend. As soon as I got home from school, I went to knock on Finn's door. When Finn saw it was me, he immediately tried to close the door. I was 1 step faster than him. I ducked down and slipped under his armpit. Listen to me first. Finn, what av sorry. You're like the warm sun in winter and the lake water in spring. All I can think about is you. The above is my confession lines. I learned them from a romantic novel. There were more lines later. But Finn didn't let me continue. He directly stopped me with 1 sentence. I'm your fucking father. I was stunned for a moment and said, that won't do. How can there be incest? Why don't you change it? Be my boyfriend instead. Finn drove me out again, and told me not to appear in front of him again. I obediently did as he said. When he was fighting with a group of gangsters, I always hid behind him and said loudly, Finn, brothers are like hands and feet. And women are like clothes. Are you willing to wear me on your body and stop running around naked from now on? A fist came swinging over, almost hitting me in the face. Finn blocked it for me, gritting his molars. He turned around and said to me, Jocelyn, are you crazy? That's when I started to feel scared, and I couldn't help but get tears in my eyes. Seeing that he was still going to fight with others, I was so scared that I quickly grabbed him. Finn, having fulfilled right say. Let's go home. I'm scared. Finn's body stiffened. And then he became even more impatient. If you're scared, get lost. He glared at me fiercely. I stubbornly grabbed the hem of his clothes. And my voice took on a sobbing tone. No. I want you to come back with me. I didn't want him to fight. And I didn't want to see him get hurt. Finn stared at me and gritted his teeth, and a struggle flashed in his eyes. At this time, the rival gang rushed up to hit him again. I really owed you in my last life. Finn angrily cursed, then let out a low sigh, giving up on himself. He held my hand and started running in a certain direction. The autumn wind blew our hair up, and the group of bad guys behind us chased and cursed. My hand and his were tightly clasped, as if we were going to elope. I don't know why, but looking at his back, I suddenly secretly smiled. When Finn noticed, he glared at me fiercely again. What the hell are you laughing at? I said, Finn. Don't we look like we're shooting an MV? You're the male lead. And I'm the female lead. Finn fell silent. His face serious. And he turned his back to me again. In the setting sun, I saw that his ears were a little red. And I couldn't help but hold his hand tighter and said, Finn, I like you. This is for real. Finn started avoiding me. Several times when I went to look for him after school, he wasn't at home. On the weekend, as soon as I finished all my homework in the morning, I secretly slipped out of the house and waited for him. I hid in the corridor of his house, and saw a one and rest flamboyantly going upstairs with him. Finn. I rushed forward and glanced at the woman warily. Similarly, the woman also took a look at me. We were both full of hostility towards each other. Finn was stunned when he saw me. And then his face turned stern and impatient again. Why are you here again? Don't good students need to go to school and do their homework? Although I minded his relationship with this woman, I still smiled and said, I came to find you after I finished my homework. I looked at him expectantly, hoping for praise. But Finn just glanced at me, gave a perfunctory, and that was it. The woman who came back with him proudly blocked between me and Finn, with an arrogant look on her face. She looked down at me and said, Little sister, hurry up and leave after you've said what you want. I have some important business to attend to with his AI. Her chest was so plump that it was twice the size of mine. Under the black mini leather skirt were two straight and slender long legs. Compared with her fairness and maturity, I, wearing a school uniform, looked like a young child. I looked at Finn with a sad and drawn expression. Do you two have something to do? Can I join you? Finn was taking out the key to open the door. With a cigarette in his mouth, the white smoke lingered around his face, making his expression look a bit unreal. He frowned and said impatiently, I have nothing to do with either of you. Get lost. People who are familiar with Finn know that, as soon as he frowns, it means he's angry. And Finn is very fierce and scary when he's angry. The woman in the mini leather skirt panicked. Then you're busy first. I'll come to find you next time. She ran away. She fled in a hurry. Finn opened the door and saw that I was still standing there. Why don't you leave? Believe it or not, I'll beat you up? He exhaled a smoke ring and rotated his wrist. He was clearly just scaring me. But he pretended quite well. I took a step towards him stubbornly and asked, Do you like that type of woman? In an instant, the distance between me and him was only a few centimeters. Finn's body stiffened. He seemed unable to move. And he looked at me with a strange expression in his lowered eyes. The sudden closeness made Finn not react for a moment. A few seconds later, he regained his usual cold and calm demeanor. Do you mean Marilyn? He took a puff of cigarette and answered casually. That's right. I just like women like her. Big boobs and a curvy ass. Which man wouldn't like that? So the woman just now was called Marilyn. Although I had been mentally prepared, when I heard this answer, I still couldn't help feeling sad. Looking at my own flat chest that was less than 2 tiles, I just felt like I was about to be drowned in sadness. And Finn turned around and walked into the house after he finished speaking. I followed behind him. Finn, having fulfilled my obsession. I'll become like that sooner or later. It's just that I'm still young now. When I'm 20, I'll also have big boobs and a curvy ass. Finn sneered, looking like he didn't believe it. As he walked, he took off his clothes. and then turned back and gave me a once-over from head to toe. You? Big boobs and a curvy ass? Better grow taller first. Shorty. The last 3 words were said with a smile. Somehow, I felt despised. And I was about to continue reasoning with him. Finn impatiently tched, and put his hand on his belt. I'm going to take a shower. Are you sure you want to keep following? And no. Only then did I notice that he was only wearing his pants. His slender collarbone and well-proportioned abdominal muscles were completely exposed in front of me. My face instantly turned red, and my eyes wandered around. Out of the corner of my eye. It seemed that the corner of Finn's mouth twitched quickly, and then quickly dropped. He stretched out his index finger and pointed at my forehead, pushing me out of his house. His voice was lazy and casual. Hurry up and leave. Good student. Don't hang out with people like me. After saying that, he seemed to laugh at himself. And then closed the door. I stared at Finn's door. Even though I couldn't see him anymore. My cheeks were still unbearably hot. I murmured in a low voice, I'm not leaving. I can only see him once a week. And I want to stay with him a little longer. Finn's parents passed away early, leaving only him and his elderly grandmother at home. His grandmother has been ill recently and has been staying in the hospital. Finn stopped going to school a long time ago. He takes part-time jobs outside during the day to earn money, and then goes to the hospital to accompany his grandmother at night. So the house is a bit messy. I took the opportunity while he was taking a shower to clean his house. When I finished, I was so out of breath from the tiredness. When Finn came out of the shower and saw that I was still there, he frowned again. Why are you still here? Noticing that the house was much tidier, his expression softened a bit. Did you do this? I nodded happily. Finn, haven't fulfilled my obsession. Give me a compliment. Will you? I looked at him expectantly. If he could give me a compliment, I would probably be over the moon. Finn had his upper body bare, and the wet tips of his hair were still dripping water. This was a Finn I had never seen before. But he just looked at me indifferently for a long time. So long that I couldn't tell what he was thinking. Is it really that hard to give a compliment? Just as I was about to give up, I heard him say, you did a good job. Don't do this again next time. I was instantly overjoyed. No way. I'll take care of all your housework from now on. I started following him around again, full of enthusiasm. Finn ignored me and shuffled back to the bedroom in his slippers. He threw himself onto the bed, closed his eyes slightly, and said in a soft voice, Jocelyn, go home. I'm tired. Don't come to see me again in the future. At this moment, Finn seemed to have been on a long journey. Lying face down on the bed, his exposed side face was filled with exhaustion. I squatted in front of him and couldn't help reaching out to touch his eyebrows and eyes. I said softly, Finn, I will leave, but I will come to see you next time. Whenever it is. I won't leave you behind. Upon hearing this, Finn opened his eyes. He looked at me quietly. The stray hair on his forehead blocked the light in his eyes, making it impossible for me to guess what he was thinking at this moment. We were so close that we could hear each other's breathing. Just having taken a shower, Finn's body carried a dampness and a fragrance of body wash. The room was very quiet, with just the two of us. I was throbbing at the sight of his pink lips and couldn't help leaning closer. Finn's Adam's apple also rolled, but just as I was about to kiss him, he suddenly got up and said in a cold voice, leave. I don't need your pity. I was at a loss for a moment. This isn't pity. Finn. I like you. But I don't like you. Finn suddenly lost his temper. He walked up to me angrily and roughly pulled me up from the ground. Get out. Don't let me see you again. My eyes turned red. While struggling, I shouted at him, you're lying. Finn, haven't fulfilled wide sigh. You like me. You're just too afraid to admit it. Others all say that Finn is cold and heartless and will never be gentle with anyone. But in front of me, he is not like that. Even though he is always fierce with his words, he has never let me get hurt. Who dares to pull down Finn's pants? But not only did I do it, but I wasn't hated by him either. Finn said, that's because you have a thick skin. What about the last time I confessed to you? I stared at him stubbornly. Last time. You clearly could have ignored me and continued fighting with others. But why did you run away with me? Finn was so angry that he gritted his back teeth and glared at me, saying, "Why the hell should I tell you?" Well, he had nothing to say. So I proudly explained the reason for him. "Because you like me." Finn's face froze, turning pale and then red. It was a typical look of someone whose secret had been exposed. Finally, having fulfilled what I obsessed, he grabbed the clothes by the bedside with a sullen face. "I'm too lazy to talk to you. Since you won't leave, then I will." I grabbed the hem of his clothes. "It's okay. I'll leave. You have a good rest. Or I'll feel sorry for you." I left his house in a happy mood. I had just left and already started looking forward to the next week's holiday. On Wednesday, I was in so much pain from my period that I couldn't straighten my back. I lay on the desk with a cold sweat all over my body. Just then, a palm with distinct knuckles came into view. I just fetched some hot water. "Hold it to keep warm." I looked up. It was actually Zephyr, the top student in our grade. He was wearing the school uniform, with a calm expression, and his words were full of concern. I didn't have much interaction with him usually, except for being in the same study group once. It is said that he comes from a well-off family, and both of his parents are university professors. However, he rarely interacts with others. So the classmates secretly say that he is arrogant behind his back. I didn't expect him to care about me, and I was a bit stunned for a moment. Just as I was about to thank him, my best friend from the next class suddenly rushed over noisily. "Jocelyn, your crush is messing around in the KTV." My best friend knew that I liked Finn. She had always disapproved and said that Finn was from a different world than us. At the moment, she was holding her phone excitedly and showed me the photo on it. As soon as I heard the words Finn and messing around, my attention immediately shifted. So I didn't notice Zephyr's slightly paused hand. There was a photo on my best friend's phone that someone had sent to her. In the photo, Finn was smoking and leaning against the sofa in the private room. A woman dressed provocatively was sitting on his lap. The photo was taken just now. The shooting environment was dim, and I couldn't see Finn's expression clearly. But I recognized the woman. It was Marilyn. Finn once said that she had big breasts and a curvy butt. And she was the type that every man liked. Looking at the intimate appearance of the two of them, my heart ached with jealousy. I want to ask for leave to find him. Enduring the discomfort of my body, I stood up from my seat. Unexpectedly, hadn't fulfilled what I'd say. Zephyr held me back. "Are you crazy? Doesn't your stomach hurt anymore?" He frowned slightly, looking both repulsive and worried. My best friend's ambiguous gaze flicked back and forth between us. I shook off his hand. "Sorry. This is my own business." Compared with the pain of my period, I couldn't bear the thought of Finn being with someone else. And I've always been stubborn. Once I've decided something, I must do it. In the end, I still asked for leave and took a taxi directly to the KTV. According to the information my best friend gave me, Finn and the others were in private room 999. When I found the room, there was a lively commotion inside. They were asking Finn and Marilyn to kiss. Finn didn't move. Marilyn, on the other hand, deliberately leaned towards him. Hearing about it is one thing, but seeing it with my own eyes is another. I called out Finn, with a choked voice. The private room fell silent. The person sitting on the sofa cast a glance at me. Finn's eyes flashed, but there was no surprise or panic on his face. He just looked at me calmly and indifferently, as if I were a stranger. "Do you want something from me?" If it weren't for the fact that his appearance and voice hadn't changed, I would have suspected that the person in front of me wasn't him. I held back my sadness. "Will you come home with me?" The private room became lively again, with everyone asking Finn who I was. Marilyn looked at me with hostility. Finn held a cigarette between his fingers, and I didn't know what he was thinking. After a moment, he slowly said, "I'm having a great time picking up girls. Why the hell should I go home?" Upon hearing this, Marilyn looked at me triumphantly, and then leaned towards Finn again. Seeing that she was about to stick to Finn's arm, I finally couldn't hold back my tears. "Finn, I've a little sigh. You son of a bitch. Even if you want to prove that you don't like me, there's no need to do it this way. Right?" Finn's hand holding the cigarette froze. "See, Hadn't so why I'd say. I know him so well. No matter what he does, I can guess his purpose. However, he would rather kiss someone he doesn't like than admit that he likes me. Is this really that difficult? Finn quickly returned to normal and sneered, "That's right. I just want you to know that I don't like you. So don't pester me in the future either. Get out." Finn roared and threw a bottle at me. The bottle shattered beside me. Although it didn't hit me, my heart instantly sank to the bottom. I know why Finn refuses to admit that he likes me. It's because in his heart, he is a penniless gangster and doesn't think he is worthy of me at all. But he has never asked me if I care. I have been trying my best to get closer to him. I thought that after taking 100 steps, I could be with him. But he has always been stepping back, pulling us apart again and again. After a long time, I will also get tired. Looking at Finn's angry appearance, I wiped away my tears. Okay. If this is what you want, then I won't chase after you anymore. After saying that, I planned to turn around and leave. But just then, my stomach hurt so much that I couldn't even stand steadily. My vision went dark, and I almost fell to the ground. I saw Finn's expression change abruptly. He pushed Marilyn away and was about to rush over. But before that, I fell into a warm embrace. Zephyr had somehow come as well. His strong arms picked me up, and his voice was gentle and patient. "Close your eyes. I'll take you to the hospital." I was taken away by Zephyr. Finn stood there all the time, watching us leave. The moment the door of the private room closed, it was as if he and I were separated into two different worlds. In the hospital, Zephyr stayed by my side. "What do you like about him?" Perhaps out of boredom, the top student in our grade actually started gossiping about my love affairs. I was lying on the bed with a needle still inserted in my hand. I suddenly remembered the first time I saw Finn. I was born into a wealthy family and never had to worry about food or drink. I had an endless supply of princess dresses and even had someone to serve me. But I wasn't happy at all. Since I could remember, my parents had been arguing all day long. The reason was that my mother was strong-willed and disliked my father for being unproductive at home, and she herself was a career woman who always wanted to control everything. Over time, they grew tired of each other. Later, my father fell in love with a female teacher. There was nothing special about that teacher, except that she had a gentle personality. So my father forcefully divorced my mother. That was the first time I saw him being so assertive, as if he had already had enough of all this. In order to escape, he was even willing to give up his only daughter. I was 10 years old that year. When I came back from school, I found that my favorite father was gone. All the things related to him at home had also disappeared. My mother told me that my father didn't want me anymore. I cried and didn't believe it. When she wasn't paying attention, I ran out. It was at that time that I first met Finn. He was wearing a black morning suit, and his face was as white as a sheet. Yet his reddened eyes were full of stubbornness and unwillingness. I burst into his secret base, while crying. He didn't scold me. Instead, he asked me what was wrong. I told him about my parents' matter. He raised his hand and wiped the tears off my face. "Stop crying. At least you still have your mother." "I have nothing left." I was still young at that time and didn't understand what death meant. Later, I learned that Finn's parents had died in a car accident, leaving only him, who was 13 years old at that time, and his elderly grandmother to depend on each other. Later, my mother found me while crying and took me back. I lay on my mother's shoulder and looked at Finn, who remained where he was. He was all alone, and there was nostalgia in his eyes as he looked at us. Later, I gradually became quiet and no longer told others that I had lost my father. During festivals, when my mother was busy with company affairs, I would obediently and sensibly say, "It doesn't matter." I forgot the gentle brother who had once comforted me. I only remembered the way he looked at my mother and me that day. I thought that, compared to him, I was lucky. In the 3rd year of junior high school, I heard that there was a gangster in our neighborhood who beat people very severely and had even killed someone. All the parents educated their children to stay away from such a person. My mother was busy with company affairs all year round and naturally didn't remember to warn me. When I was curious and wanted to see what the person who had killed someone looked like, I saw Finn. He was biting a cigarette and bent over to pick up the garbage on the ground and throw it into the trash can. At that moment, I knew that rumors were not necessarily true. The little boy who had once comforted me couldn't possibly be the bad guy that people said he was. After that, I would secretly observe Finn when I was bored. I always saw him busying himself with this and that alone. Occasionally, having fulfilled session. When he was free, he would sit on the rooftop of the dilapidated community building where he lived and smoke. At that moment, I felt that he seemed to yearn for freedom. Maybe I felt that I was in the same boat as him. Or maybe I had been warmed by him before. In short, I fell in love with Finn. I fell in love with that young man who seemed fierce but was actually lonely and gentle. No one knew how good he was. And I didn't want anyone to know either. Because then, he could be mine. In the end, I didn't answer Zephyr's question. I guessed that he might like me. So I simply rejected him. Zephyr said, "Love isn't just about mutual affection. You and him are worlds apart. Even if you get together out of passion, it may not necessarily end well in the end." I have to say that the thoughts of the top student in the grade are indeed extraordinary. I knew what he meant. No matter how kind Finn was, he was always a gangster who had dropped out of school and stayed at home. His life might never escape from our small place. But I was different. I was one of the top students in the school and would have a bright future ahead. Our families were also worlds apart. In the eyes of others, it was a mismatch. It was precisely because of these reasons that Finn pushed me away again and again. It seemed that everyone understood. Only I, full of passion, thought that true love could overcome all difficulties. After driving Zephyr away, I went through the discharge procedures by myself. It was just a menstrual cramp, and I didn't tell my mother about it. When I got out of bed, I felt dizzy for a moment. When I was about to fall, a pair of hands steadied me. A familiar smell wafted into my nostrils. It was Finn. I looked up at him and saw that his brows were furrowed, full of impatience. I thanked him and pulled my arm out of his hand, but Finn suddenly called out my name. "Jocelyn." My heart trembled. And then I heard him say, "Don't torture yourself because of me. It's not worth it. Also, heaven fulfilled and sasho. Forget about this relationship as soon as possible." A tingling pain welled up in my heart. But I pretended to be calm and looked at him steadily. "Are you caring about me? If not, what did it matter to him whether I was tortured or not? I'm just giving you a friendly reminder." Sure enough, Finn didn't admit it. He was always stubborn. And I was too lazy to argue with him. In that case, then stay out of my business. I walked around him and left the hospital. I didn't foolishly think that he had come for me. Finn's grandmother was also in the hospital. And I thought he was just passing by. 2 more days passed. And finally, it was the weekend. 2 days ago, I was still excitedly looking forward to today. But now, I had fallen out with Finn. The weekend didn't mean much to me anymore. As soon as I finished my homework, I felt a sense of emptiness. I didn't know how to spend the next 2 days. My mother was busy with company affairs all day long and didn't have time to come back at all. That day, I was walking home alone after shopping at the supermarket. Several hoodlums blocked my way. "Boss. It's her. The girl that Finn has a crush on. I heard from Lao Zhao's lackey that Finn rejected Marilyn for this girl. As long as we catch her, I don't believe that Finn won't kneel down and kowtow to you." I was shocked and recognized that they were the rival gang who had a feud with Finn. I looked around and pretended to be calm as I said, "Who is Finn? I don't know him at all." There were few people around. And I couldn't find anyone to help. The leading man sneered and said, "You don't need to know who he is. As long as he knows you, that's enough." After saying that, the man gave his subordinates a look. Before I could scream, several people rushed up and grabbed me. I was taken to the rooftop of an unfinished building. And that group of gangsters was calling Finn. I didn't know what Finn said. But the gangsta leader suddenly sneered and thrust the phone in front of me. "Little sister. Say something." I knew that he must be trying to use me to lure Finn over. My mind was in a mess. And I didn't know how to choose. If Finn really came, These people definitely wouldn't let him go. But if Finn didn't come, they wouldn't let me go either. Just as I was struggling, the gangster leader slapped me hard. Fucking talk to me. I cried out in pain. Before I could speak, a furious roar came from the other end of the phone. Kane, let out a low sigh. If you dare to touch her, I'll kill you. Then the phone call ended. Finn came very quickly. When he saw me tied to the pillar by them, he rushed over like a madman. That group of gangsters tried to stop him, but he pushed them aside. He came in front of me and said eagerly and gently, "It's okay, Jocelyn. Don't be afraid." I was crying so hard that I couldn't speak. I looked down at him and saw that his hands, which weren't eyeing the ropes for me, were trembling constantly. It seemed that he was more scared than I was. I cried and asked him, "Finn, let out a low sigh. Even so, you still won't admit that you like me?" Finn's eyes were red. He lowered his head and refused to answer. Just gritted his teeth and untied the ropes in a panic. The veins on his hands bulged. At this moment, the gangster named Kane suddenly rushed up with a stick and hit him. I was so scared that I screamed, "Finn, ha sigh. Be careful." The ropes on my body suddenly loosened. Finn held me and barely avoided Kane's attack. This was the first time he had hugged me. Just as I had imagined, Finn's arms were warm and soft. It made people feel very secure. Unfortunately, he let go of me soon and pulled my wrist to protect me behind him. "Tell me, what do you want for you to let us go?" He calmly negotiated the terms with Kane. Seeing this, Kane showed a treacherous smile of having his way. "Kneel down and count out to me 3 times. Not only will I let you go, but I'll also write off all our past grudges." Anyone who knew Finn knew that he was a tough guy. Not to mention kneeling down and kowtowing. It was impossible for him to even lower his head and apologize. But at this moment, he actually asked Kane if he was telling the truth. My heart shook. Finn. Could he really have believed the lies of this group of gangsters? Kane smiled and said of course. The next second, Finn let go of my hand and without the slightest hesitation knelt down in front of Kane. Then, let out a low sigh. There were 3 thumps. Finn. My eyes turned red. How could he bear such humiliation? He clearly said that he didn't like me. He clearly admitted that he didn't like me. Why, then, go let out a low sigh. Did he go to such lengths for me? After kowtowing 3 times, Finn didn't stand up immediately. He looked up at Kane. "Are you satisfied now?" Kane and his group of lackeys were all stunned. They didn't expect that Finn would actually do as he was told. A calculating look flashed in Kane's eyes again. Before he could speak, Finn said in a cold voice, "Don't push your luck. Before I came, I already called the police." The sound of police sirens came from a distance. Kane and his group all changed their expressions. "I'll let you go this time. Be careful next time. You bastards." Kane left a threat and then led his group of lackeys and fled. After they left, Finn swayed. "Are you okay?" I supported him worriedly. Only then did I see that he had a wound on his forehead. Blood seeped out from the wound, and it looked terrifying. Finn dodged my touch, and his voice was very soft and tired. "Let's go. I'll take you home." As the sun was setting, Finn and I walked home one after the other. The last time we were like this was when we were being chased by a group of gangsters. I looked at Finn's bat and then at his hand hanging by his side. Finn's hands were very nice. His palms were broad. His fingers were long. And his knuckles were well defined. I heard the old people say that hands like his would bring good fortune in the future. But where was Finn's good fortune? Why did such a good person have to lead such a hard life? I restrained myself again and again to hold back the urge to interlock my fingers with his. "We're here. Go in." A very soft voice suddenly came from ahead. Finn stopped. In front of us was the villa where I had grown up. He looked up, holding a cigarette between his fingers. And I didn't know what he was thinking. "Come in and have a seat. There's no one at home. I'll help you deal with the wound on your head." I extended an invitation to him. But he lowered his head and took a puff of his cigarette, and said inferiorly, "No need." I ignored him and walked over to hold his hand. He frowned and tried to pull away. I said, "Finn, had inte fel en session. Don't move. It will hurt me." Then, let out a low sigh. He became much more obedient. I took him to my home. When we entered the door, he crushed the cigarette butt and threw it into the trash can outside. As soon as I entered the house, I went to look for the first aid kit. The servant who was in charge of taking care of me at home asked if she should entertain Finn, and I told them all to go back to their rooms. When I came out with the first aid kit, Finn was still standing in the living room, rubbing his fingertips with his head lowered. That was a sign that he was craving a cigarette. Sit on the sofa. I'll deal with your wound. I imitated his usual manner and gave orders with a straight face. Finn wanted to say no need again, but I directly dragged him over. Don't move. I glared at him again. Finn impatiently clicked his tongue. He said, Jocelyn, can you stop being so pushy? I stood in front of him. The geographical position finally gave me an advantage in height, holding iodine tincture and cotton swabs. I looked down at him haughtily. What if I just don't want to? Could it be that you're going to hit me? I deliberately pressed the cotton swab dipped in iodine tincture on his wound. Finn didn't even frown, but his gaze darkened. He grabbed my waist with one hand and pulled me in front of him, lowering his voice and saying, Do you think I don't dare? I stood between his legs, and this posture gave me a feeling of being hugged by him. The smell of laundry detergent emanating from him wafted into my nostrils, mixing with his unique scent. My heart trembled, and I involuntarily exerted force with my hand. With a hissing sound, Finn's grip on my waist tightened. His voice was deep and hoarse as he said, Jocelyn, do you want to kill me? These words made my ears burn. I retracted my gaze from his face and said a bit uneasily, It's your fault for bullying me. I promise you. Finn suddenly spoke, a bit out of the blue. But I vaguely understood what he meant. My heart started pounding wildly. Finn looked up at me, and his eyes gradually changed from struggling to determined. He said, I promise you. When you get into university, we'll be together. I asked Finn why he had changed his mind. He said that it was difficult for him to make a promise before because once he was sure of someone, he would never let go. So when he questioned whether the gap between us allowed us to be together, he didn't dare to admit his feelings at all. Until he learned that I had been kidnapped. The fear at that moment made him realize how afraid he was of losing me. So he gave in. He wanted to be selfish once and strive to be with me even if it cost him his life. This answer made me so happy that I couldn't sleep for several days. On the day of school dismissal on the weekend, it suddenly started to rain heavily. Since I was on duty, I was trapped at school, watching the last classmate being picked up by their family. I wanted to call my mother to pick me up, but the reply I got was that she still had work to do and asked me to call the maid. Since I was a child, she had been absent from my parents' meetings and left me alone at home. We spent less time together in a year of over 300 days than with the maid at home. I had tried to understand her, but there was still some grievance and loss in my heart. I thought that if only once she could consider me more important than her work, I wouldn't be so sad. Just then, a low and deep voice came from the door. Jocelyn, it's time to go home. I looked up in surprise and saw Finn standing at the door with an umbrella. His expression calm. The rain dripped along the edge of the umbrella, spreading a patch of dark color on the ground. Why are you here? The haze in my heart dissipated instantly, and I ran over in great surprise. I didn't stop in time and almost crashed into his arms. He reached out to steady me. Why are you running? Be careful not to fall. His warm fingertips pressed against my pulse, and I could almost hear my own heartbeat. I asked him again how he had come, and Finn withdrew his hand, saying calmly, to pick up a certain parfum and take them home. My eyes became hot, and I couldn't help but ask, how did you know I needed someone to pick me up? Why so many questions? Take the umbrella. Finn held my hand and stuffed the umbrella into my hand. I've always been obedient, although I didn't understand why I had to take the umbrella. But I would do whatever he said. But the next second, my body suddenly lifted off the ground. Ah! Finn, how what are you doing? I was startled and almost dropped the umbrella. Finn's strong arms held me tightly. He said, Don't move. The ground is wet. Don't blame me if you fall later. After saying that, he carried me into the rain. I was stunned for a few seconds and quickly opened the umbrella properly. Only then did I silently look at my shoes. White canvas shoes. So he was afraid that my shoes would get wet. But what about him? I didn't even notice what kind of shoes he was wearing. It's a total of 3.2 kilometers from the school to my home. When the bus arrived, I had suggested taking the bus back. Finn refused. I want to hold you like this. Once we get on the bus, I'll have to let go of your hand. He was afraid of being seen by our acquaintances. Finn said, "It doesn't matter to me. But it's different for you." Hearing these words, I was both touched and felt sorry for him. I just thought that he was being too cautious in this relationship. Even though I said I wasn't afraid of other people's opinions, he still chose to protect me. Just like that, Finn carried me for 3 kilometers. I held the umbrella for him. The umbrella separated us from the outside world. I looked at his profile, and my heart was beating fast. When we got home, I was still clean and there was no trace of having been in the rain. Looking at Finn again, his shoes and the bottoms of his pants were all wet, but he seemed not to notice. Holding the umbrella and looking at me with a calm gaze. "Go in." My eyes were a bit hot, and I thanked him. Just as I turned around, Finn suddenly called my name. "Jocelyn." I turned back. I heard him say, "I miss you so much." I missed him just as much. But what I didn't expect was that Finn would say such words to me. I was smiling even in my dreams that night. When I woke up the next day, I couldn't wait to go find him. As soon as I went out, I saw Finn leaning against the wall smoking. "Why are you here? Are you here to find me?" There was a hint of a smile in Finn's eyes. He crushed the cigarette in his hand and softly, "Ahmed, I knew you were going to come find me. So I came here in advance to wait for you." I had just woken up, and my hair was still a bit sticking up. Finn reached out and touched my head, saying, "Have you finished your homework?" I was so excited that I couldn't contain myself and nodded repeatedly. "I finished it at school yesterday." This time, without me begging for praise, Finn curved his lips and said, "Our good student is really great." I was extremely happy. The words "our good student" echoed in my head all morning. Finn took me to his home. I found various books on the table in his room. "Are you studying?" I asked Finn in surprise. Finn was helping me clean the dust that had accidentally gotten on my skirt. Hearing this, he lazily lifted his eyelids and took a look. "Yeah. I want to start a business so that I can support you in the future." I felt my heart skip a beat. Mom, this guy is so smooth. Who knows how long I've been waiting for these words. Before, I was always chasing after him, but now he is the one making efforts to get closer to me. I couldn't help but hook his finger. "Can't we start dating in advance? I'm really good at studying and it won't be affected." Finn bit the cigarette and gave me a sidelong glance, refusing mercilessly. "No way. I want to ensure the future of my future girlfriend and can't let it be ruined because of me." Finn said it in a lazy and casual tone, looking like he was joking. But I knew that he was serious. I felt both happy and regretful. There are many things that only couples can do. I still have to wait for more than 100 days. I originally thought that the time until the college entrance examination, which was more than 100 days, was too short. But now, thinking that I still have more than 100 days before I can date him, I unashamedly feel that the time is so long. Finn sneered at me. "What? Are you lusting after my body?" I was stunned for a moment. And then my cheeks turned bright red. "Of course not. I mean, I want to hold hands and go on dates with you. As for the thing about the body, is that something I can think about at my age?" Finn smiled wickedly. He touched my head. "Be good. I'll give you all that in the future. Don't be in a hurry." Ard. This person really. Who's in a hurry? I had lunch with Finn. He cooked by himself and made home-cooked dishes for me. Finn is a good cook, and I ate until I couldn't straighten up from being full. Finn helplessly wiped the corner of my mouth with his fingertips. "Why eat so much? It's not like I won't cook for you in the future." I touched my bulging belly and said, "You don't understand. My mom is busy with work, and I've always eaten alone since I was a child. This is the first time someone is accompanying me. And I think the food tastes several times more delicious than usual." Finn softly clicked his tongue and said, "Then I'll accompany you to eat in the future." Finn kept his word. Every weekend after that, he tried his best to accompany me for meals. So much so that people who knew him said that Finn seemed to have reformed recently. And they hadn't heard of him causing trouble or getting into fights anywhere. Some people even said that Finn had found a young wife and had become a house husband. I told this as a joke to Finn. He had just finished washing the dishes and was sitting on the sofa smoking. Hearing this, he sneered. "Aren't I a house husband now? I have to support you. This little girl. All the time." I was proud and arrogant. "What? Are you unwilling?" Finn exhaled a smoke ring and smiled. "I'm willing." On this day, after we finished our meal, Finn walked me home. When we reached the door of my house, I was reluctant to part. The college entrance examination is only 30 days away. Will you always be with me? Perhaps youth is like this. I always tend to think too much. One moment I fantasize about a wonderful future with Finn. And the next moment I worry that he will regret it and leave. Finn touched my head. "Don't worry. Even if you tried to drive me away, I won't leave. I'm going to stick to you for the rest of my life." I was instantly happy. This is who he is. He will silently do many things for me. He will remember every word I've said. He will take care of my little emotions. And he will give me enough a sense of security when I'm feeling uneasy. Maybe before I got into his heart, he was always cold and heartless. But once I'm in his heart, he will put me on the top of his heart. Finn is the kind of person who is easier to fall in love with the longer you get along with him. I seem to like him even more now. But just then, a stern voice suddenly came from behind us. "Jocelyn." I was immediately startled. Finn instinctively protected me behind him. When I saw who it was, I panicked instantly. "Mom." My mom gave Finn a gloomy look and asked, "Who is he?" She was wearing a capable suit and was used to speaking in her role as a boss. I always felt that she treated me like one of her subordinates. I loved her but was also afraid of her. Before I could say anything, Finn sensed my fear. He squeezed my hand, giving me a sense of security. Then he said to my mom, "I'm Finn, Jocelyn's suitor." I looked at him in surprise. I didn't expect him to introduce himself like this. According to my thinking, I thought he would at most say that he was my friend. Because he cared so much about the gap between us. Does saying these words now prove his determination? Is he really taking that step and wanting to be with me? Before I could react, my mom was so angry that she rushed over and slapped him. "Slap? Why do you think you can pursue my daughter? I think you're taking advantage of her young age to deceive her." "Mom." I was startled again and quickly stood in front of Finn in a panic. "Mom. Finn didn't deceive me. I was the one who fell for him first. And I was the one who kept pestering him. I know this is wrong. If you're angry, you can hit me. But please don't hit him. Okay?" I pleaded with tears in my eyes. But my mother was furious after hearing what I said. "Jocelyn, do you even know what his background is? He's a street gangster with no parents. And he has a sick grandmother at home. What do you like about him? Do you like his part-time job of running errands for others every day? Or that shabby rental house at just dozens of square meters? I think you've been living a comfortable life for too long. And your mind has become stupid." Finn didn't show much change in his expression when he was slapped. But when he heard my mother say these words, his face froze for a moment. When I wanted to argue further, he suddenly grabbed my wrist. "You're right. With my current status, I really don't deserve Jocelyn." "Finn." I looked at him uneasily, thinking that he was going to back down and abandon me again. But unexpectedly, he changed the direction of his words. "But I will do my best to give her the life she wants. I like her. I want to cook for her for the rest of my life and protect her for a lifetime." I was stunned until my mother dragged me home. She scolded. "Naive. Stupid. The two of you are not allowed to meet again in the future." I was supervised by my mother. She wouldn't let me go out on weekends. She also sent someone to pick me up and drop me off specifically when I went to school and came back home. At first, I wasn't sad. Because every time Finn would be on the way when I went to school or came back home, and we would look at each other through the car window. Sometimes he would even throw stones at the window of my bedroom. When I stood on the second floor and looked down, I could see him leaning casually against the wall and smoking. I would also secretly send him messages on my phone, asking if we were like those who had secret meetings in ancient times. Then he would joke. So, would the young lady be willing to elope with me? Later, we talked about a lot of things. Finn said that he was working hard to earn money recently. And he also said that he was interested in the automotive industry. And our last conversation was when he said that his grandmother accidentally fell and he wouldn't be able to come and see me for a short time. At the same time, my mother also discovered that I was still secretly in touch with Finn. She confiscated my phone. She deleted all of Finn's contact information. She started to spend more time at home. This made me both happy and sad. I was happy that she finally had time to be with me. I was sad that I didn't know when I could see Finn. Also, I didn't know how Finn's grandmother's illness was going. And just then, my mother suddenly threw a university admission notice from abroad at me. I had a bad feeling in my heart. I just heard my mother say, "From tomorrow on, you don't need to go to school. You'll go and study abroad directly." Mom. I looked at her in shock and anger. This is my own life. And I want to make my own decisions. You can't just make decisions for me like this. My mother seemed to have heard a joke. You make your own decisions? She looked at me arrogantly and said, "How can you make your own decisions? If I hadn't found out in time, you would have been deceived by that hooligan long ago." But Finn is not a liar. I argued rationally, trying to prove it to her. This was what I had been doing for these days. However, my mother still refused to believe me. In her eyes, those who had no money were all cowards, beggars, and men like my father, who were called Phoenix men from poor backgrounds who strived to marry into wealthy families. Every time I argued with her, she would use the same words to accuse me. Is this attitude of yours worthy of me? I've been working my ass off outside all day long to give you a better life. But you're just like your father. It's bad enough that you don't understand me. And now you even give me a hard time for the sake of a gangster. What on earth do I owe your Jocelyn family? I listened to her scolding numbly. Since I was a child, I had experienced too many such moments. As long as she was not satisfied, she would start counting the contributions she had made to the family and, by the way, belittle my father. After listening to it for more than 10 years, my ears were almost calloused. I knew that she had suffered a lot in her heart. And I felt sorry for her efforts. But at this moment, I just felt that if I kept enduring like this, I would go crazy. So for the first time, I shouted at her. What does my father's fault have to do with me? Have I done something to sorry you? I've followed your arrangements since I was a child. Isn't that enough? The house was filled with the sound of our argument. Even the servants couldn't stand it and came over to mediate. My mother glared at me through gritted teeth and said, "Fine. Since you don't believe me, go and see with your own eyes what that gangster is doing. If you still want to be with him after you see it, I won't stop you." When I heard these words, I didn't know what they meant. It wasn't until I ran to Finn's house in the heavy rain, but I saw Marilyn opening the door for me with her clothes in a mess. Oh, it's you? What do you want with this AI? She leaned against the doorframe charmingly and looked at me triumphantly. The red marks on her skin stabbed my eyes deeply. I was trembling all over and asked, "Where's Finn? I want to see him." "But he doesn't want to see you." Marilyn lit a cigarette and started smoking it unhurriedly. I recognized the brand. It was the one that Finn often smoked, and the lighter was also the one that Finn always carried with him. I didn't believe all of this. I didn't believe that Finn would bully me like this. He clearly said before that he would never let go and that he would work hard to earn money to support me. A person like Finn couldn't possibly deceive me. Marilyn, with her bright red lips, said to me, "You think you know Finn, but how much do you really know about him? Do you know what he likes and what he hates? Do you know what kind of woman he likes? I'm the most suitable person for him. A well-behaved girl from a wealthy family like you should stay away from him." As she said this, Marilyn sneered contemptuously and was about to close the door. I reached out to block it, and the door panel clamped my palm. The pain spread through my whole body from my fingers. And Finn never came out to take a look at me. It wasn't until I left his house that he called me. On the phone. His voice was so cold. He said, "Jocelyn, I've given up on you. Come to think of it, I still like women with big boobs and big butts." I cried and cursed him for being a jerk. And then I threw my phone heavily on the ground. The rain in the sky was like a broken string. The scene of Finn carrying me for 3 kilometers because he didn't want my shoes to get dirty was still vivid in my mind. But now, he didn't care about me anymore. I was lost and heartbroken, crying bitterly in the heavy rain. Passers-by looked at me like I was a lunatic. When I got home, I was soaked through, and my hair was sticking to my face. Looking at my mother sitting on the sofa, I wiped away my tears. "You win. I promised to go abroad." The next day, I got on a plane to go overseas. I left the city that held all the memories of my youth. I lost touch with Finn. And my relationship with my mother also became somewhat strained. During my study abroad, I rarely went home. Later, because of an international dispute, I became a rookie lawyer that major law firms abroad were competing to hire. This year, I was 23 years old. My best friend from my hometown, who was far away in China, called me. "Jocelyn, I heard something recently. Finn's grandmother didn't just break her leg back then. She lay in bed for 2 months. And then breast cancer was detected. Fortunately, Haninsil failed it was in the early stage. However, at that time, your mother tried to use the matter of the surgery fee to make Finn leave you. But that guy refused. He did some shady jobs to earn money, which affected the business of those in the underworld. Just before you went abroad, he was severely beaten up. According to the doctor's diagnosis at that time, he might be paralyzed in bed for the rest of his life. When I heard this news, my eyes were already wet, and I also understood what had happened back then. No wonder Finn asked Marilyn to drive me away instead of coming out to see me himself. No wonder my mother was so confident at that time, thinking that I would definitely agree to go abroad. It turned out that Finn was seriously injured. I decided to return to China. My fellow townsman and work partner, Zephyr, was very surprised by this. "Why don't you stay here together?" Back then, it was only after I got on the plane that I found out that Zephyr had been admitted to the same university as me. His parents were very democratic and let him choose the law major that he liked. But my mother, in order to make me inherit her business, chose the finance major for me. My belated rebellion led me to make a major decision. At that time, I didn't know what I was going to do in the future. I just simply wanted to go against my mother. So I changed my major and became Zephyr's classmate. After getting along with him for so many years, I gradually fell in love with this profession. Seeing me remain silent, Zephyr seemed to have guessed the answer. "Is it for that person?" I nodded. In fact, I hadn't mentioned Finn for many years. It had been so long that I thought I had forgotten him. But when someone mentioned him again, that name still beat passionately in my heart. I knew that I still liked that jerk. There was a trace of sadness in Zephyr's eyes. He said, "Jocelyn, I've liked you for 7 years. When will you turn around and take a look at me?" When I first came abroad, I wasn't used to everything here. It was Zephyr who accompanied me through that difficult time. Once, having fulfilled my obsession, I was working part-time in a restaurant alone. After work, I was followed by a drunk man. And it was Zephyr who came to pick me up in the snowstorm. That winter, I missed the taste of home extremely. Eating fast food for a long time made me want to vomit. It was Zephyr who took me to a restaurant, rented out the back kitchen, and cooked a home-cooked meal for me himself. We spent many festivals together, and we also took walks together when it snowed for the first time. To a large extent, Zephyr gave me comfort. After I had a falling out with my family and after I lost Finn, it was he who had always been with me. If I hadn't met Finn, I might really have fallen in love with him. But that's how feelings are. The order is very important. I fell in love with Finn first, and then I couldn't hold anyone else in my heart. I apologized to Zephyr and gave him all the resources I had in foreign countries. Although I knew that no amount of benefits could repay his friendship, I could only try my best to make up for it. I started packing my luggage to return to China. A domestic automotive manufacturing company just contacted me, and asked me to handle a case of confidential theft. The other party showed great sincerity on the phone. Jocelyn, we heard that you're a rising star in the legal field, so we hope you can take on this case. As long as you agree, the legal fee is not an issue, no matter how much it is. When looking through the materials, the name of the client caught my attention. My eyes became hot. It doesn't matter. No matter how much the legal fee is for this case, I'll take it. I hadn't been in touch with Finn for many years. However, I never expected that when we met again, Fee would become my client. I investigated his information and learned that he had now established a company and become one of the leading figures in the domestic automotive industry. Opinions about him in the industry vary. Some people say that he is bold and has a unique vision, and he has risen to the upper echelons of the industry in just a few years. Others say that he came from a gangster background and would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. Even the first pot of gold he made to start his business was obtained through improper means. But in any case, I met a different Finn. We decided to meet at a restaurant. I arrived half an hour early. While sitting in the private room, I felt that every minute and every sec and became extremely long. Until the door of the private room was opened from the outside. I instantly became nervous and my gaze involuntarily turned towards the door. I saw Finn, dressed in a neat black suit, slowly coming into view. His eyebrows and eyes were deep and profound. Compared with many years ago, he had less hostility and more composure. The sense of alienation that keeps people at a distance was still there. My heart was pounding rapidly as I looked at him. Until Jocelyn, long time no see. I had an urge to cry. It really has been a long time. However, I still remember how President Finn broke his promise and left me behind. Finn didn't say anything more. Regarding the case, I had been talking to his assistant. During that time, I ridiculed him more than once, asking him why he didn't talk in person, and if it was because he hadn't received an education. Finn didn't argue with me. He just admitted whatever I said and completely indulged me. Later, I asked him for an exorbitant lawyer's fee. 100,000 yuan per hour. Can President Finn afford it? It's up to Jocelyn. When it was time to leave, I originally planned to take a taxi home. But Finn stopped his car in front of me. Get in the car. I'll take you home. I ignored him, hailed a taxi directly, and swaggered away. In the following days, Finn somehow got hold of my current address and sent a bouquet of flowers to my door every day. Even if I went downstairs to throw out the garbage, I could run into him. I couldn't help but mock him. Has President Finn's company gone bankrupt? Why are you so idle every day? Finn personally handed me the rose in his hand. It's not that it's gone bankrupt, but it needs a boss's wife. When I heard this, I laughed. Is President Finn chasing after me? Finn squinted his eyes and asked, Isn't it obvious? I'm proposing to you. Finn chased after me for several months. I scolded him and even hit him. But no matter how I tried to drive him away, he just wouldn't leave. One day, after finishing a lawsuit and getting off work, I unexpectedly encountered the family members of the defendant causing trouble. When that middle-aged man, in a fit of excitement, held a knife and wanted to kill me, a figure suddenly rushed out and hugged me. Finn. At that moment, I felt an unprecedented sense of fear. Finn was injured and sent to the hospital. While I was waiting outside the emergency room, every minute and every second felt like torture. Fortunately, Hassington, his injury wasn't too serious. The doctor said that there was a steel plate in the patient's body, which blocked the knife attack. Otherwise, that knife might have directly stabbed into Finn's heart. I felt icy all over after hearing this. Afterwards, Finn gradually regained consciousness. He told me that the steel plate was installed when his ribs were broken by someone in the past. Unexpectedly, it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. And this steel plate had saved his life again. He spoke casually, but I couldn't imagine how much pain he had endured or how he had gotten through that period. I blamed him for being too reckless. But he raised his hand and wiped the tears from my face. If I'm not that reckless, having fulfilled my sigh, what can I use to love you? Later, our relationship became ambiguous. On the day Finn was discharged from the hospital, He insisted on sending me home first. When we arrived downstairs at my home, I asked him if he wanted to come up and have a seat. Finn was stunned for a moment. And then the color in his eyes deepened. He said, "Jocelyn, you're an adult now. I won't let you go like I did before." Then he got out of the car with me and entered the elevator. It was very quiet in the elevator. And we stood one in front of the other. This was the state between us for a long time. But different from many years ago, I used to be accustomed to chasing his back, so I was always the one walking behind. And now, he stood behind me, leaning against the elevator. Through the reflection of the elevator door, I saw that he had been staring at me. His gaze was indescribably tender and alluring. Ding, the elevator door opened. We walked in silence, one in front of the other. The moment I opened the door, Finn pushed me in and then pinned me against the wall. I exclaimed, "Finn." Finn asked in a hoarse voice, "Are you in a relationship?" I shrank into his arms. "Don't you think it's too late to ask now?" "Finn, it's not too late. Even if you are, I'll still snatch you away." "Jocelyn, I thought I would lose you forever." I touched his eyebrows and eyes. "Are you willing to admit that you like me now?" Finn didn't answer. He told me that all these years, he had been desperately trying to get ahead, not for himself, but to give me an explanation. After my parents died, I thought my life would just be like that. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't even care about how much money I had. But since I had you, I understood the meaning of my existence. This was the first time I heard Finn say so many words. I thought he was a person who wasn't good at expressing himself. But although he didn't mention loving me in any of his words, every word was full of love for me. I didn't know how I felt at that moment. I just felt that we had missed so many years together. I was very sorry that I hadn't been by his side during his most difficult times. The world was pitch black, and we embraced and kissed each other. In the dark night, Finn's voice was low and full of affection. "Jocelyn, I love you." After being with Finn, we went back home together. My mother sent me abroad that year. And since then, my mother and I had rarely talked. So, when Finn held my hand and stood in front of the villa where I had grown up, I was even more nervous than him. "Your mother did it for your own good. There's no overnight feud between a mother and a daughter. Don't be angry with her anymore." Finn squeezed my palm and led me to ring the doorbell. The maid at home hadn't been replaced. She was so excited to see me back that she ran into the house. "Madam, the young lady is back. The young lady is back." I had been abroad for many years and only stayed for a few days each time I came back. The time I spent with my mother was really very limited. Before long, there were hurried footsteps coming from inside the house. My mother came downstairs directly without even tidying her hair. When she saw me, the usual coldness returned to her face. "You still remember to come back?" I suddenly realized that she seemed to mid-aged a lot. Perhaps because she wasn't wearing makeup. She used to pay the most attention to her appearance. She would never allow any white hair in her hair and would always dress neatly even at home. But now, looking at her in her home clothes, with the wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, I was suddenly speechless. Finn was the first to speak. "Jocelyn just came back a few days ago. I couldn't wait to spend a few days with her. So we're a bit late coming back. Please don't be angry." My mother glanced at our interlocked fingers and snorted coldly, saying, "I heard that your company is involved in a lawsuit. What? Can't you even solve this problem and you still need a woman to deal with it?" She didn't seem surprised at all, and I was with Finn. Moreover, she seemed to know everything about Finn's current situation. Before I could ask, the maid beside us took the gift from Finn's hand and smiled, saying, "Miss has been abroad these years. And President Finn has visited Madam at home quite often. Before, Madam always had headaches. And President Finn even asked his business friends to specifically diagnose and treat Madam. Madam has long acquiesced." "Acquiesced to what?" I looked at the maid curiously. However, with my mother's call of Sister Chen, the maid didn't dare to say anything more. If she didn't say it, that's okay. Anyway, hadn't fulfilled my ansai. I was already used to the life where my mother had been keeping everything from me for all these years. I said my first sentence to her that night. "I'm with Finn now. I accepted and understood your opposition to us being together back then. But now we're both adults and have our own jobs and careers. You can't use those same reasons to stop us anymore. Finn and I are going towards marriage. My mother ignored me and instead looked at Finn and said, "Does the promise she made to me still count?" I instinctively looked at Finn. What promise did you make to my mother? Why did it feel like these two people were hiding a lot of things from me? Finn scratched the palm of my hand. "I'll tell you when we get home." Then he replied to my mother, "Of course." Later, I found out Finn had put all the shares of the company in my name. He even signed a commitment letter, promising that he would never bully me in his life and would never leave me alone. I was shocked and scolded him for being stupid. Why did he give me the company shares? Wasn't he afraid that I would deceive him out of his money and his affection? He said that without me, he wouldn't have all of this. And he was willing to be deceived by me. I thought it was a bit melodramatic, but I was also touched by it. At the same time, I understood my mother's good intentions. She was afraid that I would make the same mistakes as she did and be abandoned and by the husband I once loved. So, she was willing to be the bad guy and do everything she could to prevent Finn from hurting me. On this day, I used the excuse of getting some clothes to go home. I hesitated for a while and then said thank you to my mother. My mother still had that indifferent look on her face. She just mad while reading the newspaper. It wasn't until I was about to leave with my things that she called me back somewhat eagerly. "Stay for dinner at home tonight." My eyes instantly became sour. I turned around and nodded, "Okay, Mom." With my mother's consent, Finn and I went to visit his grandmother together. Finn's grandmother was 80 years old this year, but she was in better health than I had imagined. While Finn was cooking in the kitchen, his grandmother secretly showed me his childhood photos. This was when Leal had just turned 1 month old. The open crotch pants he was wearing were made by me with my own hands. This was when Leal wet the bed at the age of 5. At that time, he was so angry that we were laughing at him. And he cried really hard. This was when Leal was transitioning from primary school to junior high school. Our Leal has been good at studying since he was a child. If it weren't for his parents. I just found out that Leal was Finn's childhood name. Who would have thought that the young man who used to be a street bully and is now a business boss could have such a down-to-earth name? While snickering, I noticed that there were no more photos at the back of the photo album. Instead, there were one after another plane tickets for trips both at home and abroad. These are. I picked up one of them and found that the departure time was 4 years ago. Finn's grandmother sighed and said, "These are the plane tickets that Leal bought to look for you over the years." Over the years. He's been abroad countless times. At first, he couldn't even afford the airfare. He had to save money by living frugally for a whole month to be able to buy a ticket. My heart felt all sorts of emotions as I listened. During the days abroad, I always thought that I had lost touch with Finn. I never imagined that he had gone to my city countless times. Yet I was always unaware of it. Finn's grandmother said that after I left that year, Finn was in a state of decadence for a long time. Leal was raised by me. This child may seem heartless on the surface, but in fact, he values relationships deeply. Back then, he had an accident and had to separate from you. I watched him lying in bed for several days without sleeping. He was suffering so much in his heart. However, he never told anyone about it. One day, I found a bloody knife under his pillow and almost fainted from fright. He cried and said, "Grandma, I can never be with her again. How can a useless person like me be worthy of her?" That was the first time I saw him cry. Since his parents passed away, this child had never shed a single tear. He truly loves you. Fortunately, until failed. Later he remembered what he had promised you. He said that if he wanted to give you happiness, he couldn't go back on his word. Child, you have no idea how Ella got through that period. He insisted on doing rehabilitation exercises every day. His knees were all bruised. And every night the pain from the wounds made him tremble. This situation lasted for more than half a year. And he managed to hold on through gritted teeth. Actually, Grandma has always been very grateful to you. If it weren't for you supporting his belief, he might have died long ago. Listening to Finn's grandmother's words, I didn't know when I had already burst into tears. In the past, I always thought that the love between Finn and me was unfair. Why was it always me chasing after him? Why was it always me being abandoned by him? It must be because he didn't love me enough. But after listening to Finn's grandmother's words, I realized that I seemed to have never done anything for Finn. On the contrary, Finn was seriously injured because of me. And then he had to give up the comfortable life and choose a path that was harder than everyone else's because of me. He loves me no less than I love him. The meal is ready. Let's eat. Finn suddenly appeared and interrupted my conversation with Finn's grandmother. Seeing my face covered in tears, his expression changed. And he immediately walked in. What's wrong? Why are you crying? Ignoring the presence of the elder, I threw myself into his arms and cried. Finn's grandmother took the opportunity to leave the room. Finn was stunned for a moment, then raised his hand and touched the back of my head, coaxing me in a soft tone, Jocelyn, Jocelyn. What on earth happened? I cried and said. Finn, hadn't fulfilled what I'd said. During these 5 years abroad, I missed you every single day. I always thought that you didn't love me. But today I realize that compared to what you've done for me, I've basically done nothing for you at all. Upon hearing this, Finn kissed the top of my head. Jocelyn, Jocelyn. I don't need you to do anything for me. I'm already very grateful that you can come into my world. I pulled out of his embrace, stood on tiptoe, and kissed his lips. Finn, I love you. 29. We chose an auspicious day, and Finn and I got our marriage certificate. After getting married, Finn became extremely clingy. He even stopped going to the company and pestered me at home every day. Originally, hadn't fulfilled my upset because of the 5 years when we lost contact. We had become a bit estranged from each other, but because of his fiery enthusiasm, we gradually regained the state of our past interactions. Only then did I realize how jealous Finn could be. One day, Zephyr called to ask me how my married life was. I talked to him about Finn's deeds and couldn't stop laughing. After hanging up the phone, I saw Finn leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, looking at me through gritted teeth. Why are you still in touch with him? At first, I didn't pay much attention and even told him about the helps Zephyr gave me when I was abroad. I can't just ignore him after returning to China, can I? Finn gave a cold snort. But if I remember correctly, it was him who carried you away in the KDD that year, right? That guy likes you. Only then did I react. I looked at him in surprise and found that he was acting jealous. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry for a moment. Yes, adding fulfilled word Sasher. Zephyr did say that he likes me. I pretended not to notice his thoughts and deliberately teased him. If I hadn't decided to return to China, maybe I really would have been with him and, before I could finish my sentence, Finn rushed over and covered my mouth. A few minutes later, I fell into his arms, gasping for breath. His eyes were red, and his thumb rubbed against my lips as he said, "You can only be mine in this life, and in the next life too, and in the life after that." Looking at his domineering appearance, I raised my hand and hooked it around his neck. Then, let out a low sigh. May I ask, Finn, having fulfilled my sigh, can we go to the bed? I can't wait a bit. Epilogue. Finn's perspective before I met Jocelyn. There were several times when I felt that life was meaningless. My parents were dead. The relatives in my family cut off relations with us, afraid of getting involved with me. A big trouble. Only the old lady in my family was willing to take care of me. The first time I met Jocelyn, she was surrounded by 2 bastards. I saved her on a whim. But I didn't expect that this girl would bite the hand that fed her and pester me ever since. Oh, Jocelyn just told me that it wasn't actually our first encounter. Our first encounter was when her father just abandoned her. I don't remember. It seems there was such a thing. But in any case, after being pestered by this girl, I didn't have a single peaceful weekend. The reason was that she would come to my house to find me every weekend. I'm not unfamiliar with women who are persistent and hard to shake off, but someone like her, who couldn't be scared away or driven off, was the first I had ever seen. That day, I was fighting with the rival gang, and this girl actually grabbed me and said she was scared. She was scared but still confessed her love? I really don't know what was going on in her head, but when I turned around and saw her eyes were red, just like a little rabbit, I actually felt sorry for her. That was the first time I held a girl's hand. Jocelyn's hand was so small and tender that I could completely wrap it with one of my palms. She said she liked me and asked if we were like we were going to elope. These thoughts were really naive. But my heart was pounding wildly. At that moment, I realized that I had fallen in love with Jocelyn. But from then on, I started avoiding her. There was a huge gap between us. She was a well-behaved girl with a bright future and a good family background. I was a street gangster who had nothing and dropped out of school early. On her birthday, I might not even be able to give her a bouquet of flowers. What right did I have to be with her? So that day in the KTV, I deliberately acted mean to Jocelyn, hoping that she would hate me and never come to find me again. When I saw her faint, my heart clenched, and I almost gave up all my previous efforts. Fortunately, having fulfilled Leand's session, her classmate suddenly appeared and carried her away. That guy seemed to come from a good family background at first glance. I later investigated him, and everything was as I had guessed. Jocelyn should be with someone like that. But why does my heart hurt so much? That bastard Kane actually kidnapped Jocelyn. When I got this news, I almost went crazy. Just thinking that Jocelyn would be bullied. I wanted to kill those bastards. When I rushed to the unfinished building and saw Jocelyn with her nose red from crying, I was really terrified. I said, "Jocelyn, don't be afraid. It's okay now." Actually, I wanted to hold her tightly in my arms. But I'm such a coward. I didn't dare to do that. Even though I had said in my heart countless times, "Jocelyn, I like you. I really, having just settled my obsession, really like you." However, when Jocelyn questioned me, I still didn't have the courage to admit it. Until she took me to her home and helped me apply medicine. She was really gentle at that time. So gentle that I couldn't control myself and wanted to possess her. I wanted to be her man and possess her for a lifetime. I struggled while sinking deeper. By the time I realized it, I had already said the words that I wanted to be with her. Jocelyn was overjoyed, but she didn't know. I was even happier than her. Admitting that I liked her wasn't as difficult as I thought. So, I spent a really wonderful period of time with her. It was so wonderful that in the following years, I felt like it was all a dream. When I was most looking forward to being with her and when I was determined to give her a bright future, I was beaten up by people in the underworld and almost lost my life. When I woke up, I learned that I might have to lie in bed for the rest of my life. And Jocelyn's mother came forward and asked me not to delay Jocelyn's future. Yes. What right did a useless person like me have to be with her? If she knew the news of my injury, she would probably cry again. So, I asked Marilyn to help act and drive that silly girl away. "Jocelyn, I'm sorry. This time I can't hold an umbrella for you anymore. If I had never seen the light, I could have endured the darkness. But after losing Jocelyn, I wanted to end my own life several times. The wounds hurt so much. But what hurt even more was my heart. When I put the knife on my wrist, I thought of every bit of the time I spent with Jocelyn. I wasn't willing to give up. I wasn't willing to give up like this. I was even more unwilling to give Jocelyn to someone else. I was afraid that others would bully her. So I started to participate in rehabilitation exercises as the doctor told me. During that painful time, it was Jocelyn who always supported me to keep going. Fortunately, I succeeded. Even though we were separated for many years, I was finally able to hold her in my arms again. And now, I can finally say that sentence confidently. "Jocelyn, I love you. Marry me." On the day I proposed, Jocelyn cried her eyes out. At night, she kept saying that my proposal was too hasty, and that she didn't even have a chance to put on makeup. But I swear that Jocelyn is the most beautiful woman in the world. There is no one else like her. Mini theater one day after Finn and I got married. As soon as I got home from work, I eagerly threw myself into his arms and kissed him passionately. Actually, it was my birthday that day. I don't know why, but I just missed him. Then, let out a low sigh. I saw a pair of extremely familiar small panties. Finn smiled charmingly, tilted my chin, and asked, "Do you remember this?" How could I not remember it? Wasn't this the pair he was wearing when I confessed my love to him? The pattern of bald gown was chosen by Finn's grandmother, who doted on her grandson deeply. I don't know why, but at this moment, I felt an unusual excitement when looking at it. I swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked in a low voice, "Is this a new one?" Finn smiled and asked, "Do you like it?" I nodded vigorously, "I like it." And I pounced on him with a shout. All I could hear in my ears was Finn's doting laughter. Be good. We still have a long time ahead. The end.